I know the traffic's pretty bad coming in, so we'll wait for 2 more minutes and then get started. I'm on a mic, not because I have a big mouth and a loud voice, so it's not necessarily for you, it's for the people online. I put this out, I think, at the end of August, and we had about 30, 40 people. Then I put it out again last week, the announcement, and we had 66. And then I did a last call yesterday, and we had almost 100. So there's about 65 who said that they would be coming in today. Given the weather sometimes and the provision that you could go online to see the training, maybe some elected to do just that. I was hesitant about putting it online because there's a part of this, if you, when you read your email, there are certain parts to this that I wanted to discuss and do a Q&A. And when we're doing it in person and online, it kind of can get logistically crazy. So I had to kind of process that whole, envision what that would look like. And it really is, the purpose of our meeting is to go through new state law and new board rule regarding students receiving 504 accommodations and how we are reporting from the district or LEA to the state office. And just to give you some time to answer questions that you might have. And then we are also looking at the 504 handbook as well. And we're doing some revisions. And I felt like I needed to present the draft format to you in pieces so that you can give me feedback. Because where I have examples of disabilities and recommended accommodations, you might have a trend of disabilities that I don't have in the handbook. And so I want to be able to, if it's happening at your site, then I want to be able to provide additional information and recommended accommodations for those. So there's going to be a part of our training today where we are going to work in groups, and I will give you sections of the draft, and I'd like to have your feedback as well, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody on WebEx and here with us today in person. My name is Momi Tu'ua and I serve as the Equity Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education here. I started as a school counseling specialist about 3 years ago and transitioned into this new role. I haven't been here for a year yet, and so in some regards I'm learning along with you and reading a lot of case law and precedents and best practices and corresponding with some of you in the field and as well as talking to the Office for Civil Rights in our region to give you the best feedback and information as you provide support to your students. I have my staff support here, Amanda Charlesworth. And really, I couldn't do this without her. We were here till about, 5 o'clock last night, setting up the room and just making sure that we had all our ducks in a row. So I appreciate you, Amanda. She will be recording the WebEx, and at some point in time, I will send out the recording of this, the link, so that you can go back to it or share this with other site administrators in your LEA. When I say LEA, it's equivalent to an entity that has their local school board. So an LEA could be a district or it could be a charter school, okay? I wanted to also let the people know who are on WebEx that if you will mute your laptop or computer so we don't hear what's going on in your office, and please, if I could get your undivided attention during this time, your feedback is really valuable, and the discussions that will take place here during the training will help bring into context what is currently happening in your schools. The thing about law is that it doesn't give you situations, scenarios. And so when we are able to share in a group and process, because every situation is highly individualized, then it provides us additional information to take back to our schools. So we'll definitely engage in that. And as I'm presenting to you, if you have certain questions regarding students that have come or parents who have come to you with certain requests or observations that you have made as coordinators within your school, then, and you don't quite know how to come to a resolution, I hope that we're in an environment here where it's okay to disclose certain things, because we're all learning together. You have an agenda. See, someone didn't mute there. You have an agenda before you, and I kind of added to the agenda, as we always do. If you haven't done that, when you're doing a PowerPoint, you're like, "Ooh, I forgot that." So you do have an agenda, and I wanted to go through several things. When you walked in, you saw a coordinator's directory, both to the districts and to the charter schools. This is something that we actually post electronically on our websites so that stakeholders, parents and students have access to your contact information. This is also something that we give to the Office for Civil Rights so that they know that every LEA, and when you read literature from OCR, you're considered a recipient of federal funding. And so every LEA by law needs to have a 504 coordinator of 15 or more students. Okay? And so I wanted to give that to you so that you can go through it. If there are updates that need to be made, I'm going to ask you to email me with those updates. And my email is right up here, momi.tua@schools.utah.gov. If you're here because you got an email from me, so you can just query up my name and you'll see the email address at the bottom and let me know. If you have, I have a listserv. We're all on the listserv here? We are, okay. Because some of us are on the listserv and then our site 504 administrator at, say, the schools, they can choose to be a part of the listserv as well. If you joined the listserv with me at, I think it was the beginning of this year in January, you'll see certain things. I try not to send out tons of notifications unless there's a training. But I do, when someone from the field asks me a particular question, I'm like, I wonder if the rest of the field needs to know this answer too. And then I send it out to you. And I do this, what's called a quick quiz, just to see for you to evaluate where you're at in a certain scenario, and then I give you the answer. Likewise, on the listserv, if there are other recommendations, because this is for you to use, or for you to, information for you to have. If you do have recommendations, I want it to be useful to you, and I'm happy to receive those and make those adjustments, so you can email me on that as well. How many of you have gone to our website? How many of you have had difficulty navigating in our website? Yes. Okay. And I apologize for that. We also had to make corrections to our website to be accessible to people with disabilities, and so some changes needed to be made, including our forms and our PDFs. They all have to be ADA compliant. And as they become compliant, we post them on our website. I wanted to quickly show you. Are they able to see there now on WebEx? Yeah. Okay, good. How to get to the equity piece or part of USBE. So if you go to schools.utah.gov and you go to departments, you're like, okay, department, equity. Okay, I'll look under E, and voila. well, not voila, because there is no E. There is no equity under E. Where you need to go is under school counseling, equity, and prevention. I am requesting that this be teased out so that you have a straight shot to the equity link. But for now, if you go under school counseling, equity, and prevention, and you click on that link, then you click on school counseling, equity, and prevention, then you go to educational equity. Under that educational equity link, you'll see what my office covers it, and then the 504 link is right there. So that you know, I also provide support in the field to Title VI, supports based on race, ethnicity, country of origin. Title IX, supports based on sex and discrimination that goes with that. And then also I've been given the charge from the board to develop a culturally responsive model that supports all students, every student in public education. In fact, the first imperative of the school board is educational equity. And instead of using the word all, it says every. And that really, you know, when we talk about every, we're talking about even our students with disabilities, right? They say that when you do presentations, you always need to give the why. I'm going to stay here for a minute. And, you know, providing supports to students with disabilities, it's federal law, you know, and it feels kind of like, well, because I told you so sort of answer. But really the why, when you think about it, we have personal acquaintances, friends, children, families who have disabilities. And when we see that in the context through their eyes and what they're able to access and what they're not able to access, we have a different lens, and the advocacy piece is awakened. Historically, for these protected classes, these students with disabilities, their access has not been addressed. And so their education has been marginalized. And so when we address the needs of our students under Section 504, we are addressing the access piece to their general education, okay? There is another site that we built in response. We didn't want to miss a beat with stakeholders being able to access our resources. So we have another website that's uen.org/equity toolkit/. And here, as opposed to what you see on the USBE site, there are certain links that still are not active. And so there's a little bit of frustration that I sense from coordinators that they're not able to look at procedural safeguards and what those samples look like. And so on the equity website, through UEN, if you click on Section 504, really this is a resource that you can provide to parents and students, and you can use this resource as well. So looking at a parent guide to Section 504 in English, and then Section 504 in Spanish, you can look at how do you prepare students with disabilities in transitioning from one grade to the next. And with school counselors, when we talk about four-year plans, we're also looking at those transitional pieces, not just from grade to grade, but we're looking at from school to school. So a student with a disability, you know, making our receiving school aware of accommodations. Some of us have systems in place in our student information system where it feels seamless. And others, we don't have that seamless sort of transition. And so Section 504, we need to assure that without a hiccup, students are able to transition to the next school, and then also transition out of school into post-secondary education and careers. And so there are handouts that speak to these transitions and timelines for students and parents. As you can see here, we also have, I should make this bigger. There's an advocacy piece, the Utah Parent Center. Some of you might be aware of this, where parents, if they need additional help or support, the Utah Parent Center, at no cost to the parents, can respond to some of the questions that they might have, or be a mediator in communicating with a school, or to clarify with the parents what their rights are. So that's a really good resource. And even for you in the field, I want to be a support to you in answering questions that you have. Many of you have emailed me, and I try to be responsive to your questions. But for whatever reason, if you want to use the Utah Parent Center as a resource as well, they are volunteers that you can contact. We also have a link here for school nurses, and then literature and from USBE and how to file a complaint or an inquiry from to USBE and to the Office of Civil Rights. So that's what's included on this site. Do I have any questions about this? Good question. How long will the forms be how long will it take for the forms to be available online? So we're going through a revision process right now. This is where I will use your feedback at the second part of our meeting today. And then when we make it ADA compliant, we can post it as soon as we can. So I actually have slated out October 3rd. I think it's October 3rd. I have my calendar here. It's October 3rd, where I will be doing a WebEx recording of the new handbook and what it looks like. So right after today, with your feedback, I'm going to go to the draft and make some adjustments, make it ADA compliant, and then post it immediately. And I will blast it out to the field and then provide additional recording of, okay, here's what's in the book and here's what you want to look for, and so on and so forth. Now, the other forms on the USBE website, it's as when we get forms ADA compliant. Now, you got to think about everybody in the entire agency doing this at the same time. So that's why you see links appear from day to day and become active. So thank you for your patience. If you feel like, okay, I need something right now, you email me and I'll give you the handout. It's just not ADA compliant, okay? Any other questions about that? Okay. So we're going to go through the overview of R277753. It's a rule that was newly made in June. Amanda, do you have a question?
I just have an online comment.
Okay.
So a comment that Marcy Elliott has actually made the forms and her forms and is willing to share, but she's still proofreading.
Yeah, if she's willing to share that, I'm happy to look at it to see if that's going to work for all of us. In Nebo School District, Jeff Peterson, I think it was the evaluation form, it was highlighted in a newsletter, a national newsletter that, proved to be useful nationwide. And so that's something that I'm plucking out of there, if he'll give me permission to use that as part of the handbook. Then we'll take we'll look at the overview of the handbook. I hesitated in providing you a full copy, every one of you, of the handbook, because still it's in draft form, and I didn't want it to be misinterpreted as the voice from USBE. So I have it cut up in pieces so that we can work in small groups and you can provide me feedback on that. And that'll take place after our break, and then report out on certain things. If you just joined us, welcome. And I really would love for you to ask questions as we move along here. So quickly, in 1973, Section 504 was the Rehabilitation Act was passed by Congress, and it addressed students with disability or people with disabilities. It's not exclusive to just education, but we are going to talk about Subpart D that speaks to education. And then there was an amendment that took place in 2009 and some changes. It made the definition of disability much wider and broader. And so I hear in the field the comment like, it just feels like almost every disability that is brought up that we have to provide accommodations. And what I'll say to you is that if you have your processes in place as a team, as a 504 team, you will arrive to the appropriate conclusion. If we don't have our processes in place, then sometimes we feel like, okay, we need to provide these accommodations and everything from A to Z. And we need to be careful about that. So having those procedures in place keeps the student safe in addressing his or her need, as well as the school being in compliance. And so basically, we talk about FAPE, and that's the free appropriate public education for all students with disabilities. And so it's about the access piece under 504. Okay? So when we talk about the access piece, what are some examples of access that supports our students with disabilities? The website, gosh darn it. And sometimes even school districts will get called out and say, okay, you're out of compliance. We are not that entity, by the way. That comes from Office for Civil Rights. What about a student in a wheelchair? Okay, so access to those classes. Physical access. What else? Hearing, vision. Okay, so those are the pieces that speak to access. Our relationship with special education is unique because 504 does cover students who receive IEP or who have an IEP, right? And their disability, generally speaking, is under the learning piece of 504. So we still address, as 504 coordinators, we still address the access piece of FAPE for students with disabilities, or a discrimination piece, okay? For students who have an IEP. Now, when we look at funding that comes federally, is there a line item for Section 504? Yeah, no, okay. But we are still recipients because we receive federal money, right? So that holds us to being in compliance. And then do we have any states right now who receive where their own legislature has a lot allocated money to 504s? Okay. Oops. No, not yet is the answer. And I say not yet because Utah is the first state that has legislative support to provide funding for students with disabilities on 504 accommodations, okay? So this is the part that I'm going to speak to you about right now. In February, Senate Bill 61 made it so that there is going to be a funding determination for students receiving 504 accommodations whose expenditures exceed 150% of the WPU. Okay? And so there's funding there, well, coming down the pike, but they are asking us as a state in public education to give them feedback on what it is that we're actually spending on our students. Some of our LEA's board has allocated money for 504 students. Do you any of you have that allocation? Okay. Alpine School District is an example that they have a line item funded allocation for students with 504s. So the state has come with this plan to provide reimbursement, and it's prorated to the LEAs whose students' expenditures exceed that 150% threshold. I'm going to just take a second here. You can read this. Yes.
So, as of right now,
Okay, so the question is, can we use, right now, can we use special education funding to cover 504 expenses? And the answer is no. Those are clearly separated. And where we see federal and state funding coming in for special education services, we don't see it coming in federally nor state yet. And some of us district-wise, we do. Yes.
Thanks.
So
So 9:45? All right.
if we're using funding for services such as counseling, 504s, I mean, it's rare, but we still do sometimes. That's the kind of thing that you want. We don't have a line item, but we will spend school funds to do those.
Yes, you will include that in your report, definitely. And I'm going to show you the spreadsheet in just a sec. So basically what the law says is they want to know information on 504 students, and they want to know how much we spend on each student, okay, to make that determination. And so during the summer, the board passed that there are two things that need to take place at the LEA. One is that your student information system needs to be built to accept and designate not just that the student is a 504 student, but designate them according to certain categories. Here they are. Okay, so you have that built into your SIS. Now, through your SISs, then we are able to grab that data from UTREX here, and then we can say to legislature, because USBE will need to report to legislature on or before January 30th to let them know how many students actually are on 504s. And in what areas do we see, impact? Yes.
So, in Jordan District, we can't access those categories yet. Do you know when that's going to happen?
Okay, so the question is, we can't see those categories yet on our SISs. And do I know when that's going to happen? We informed your IT people in the summer, and it was just a general sort of announcement because it hadn't been made board rule till June. This Thursday, I'm announcing it again at the data conference for your IT people who will be attending, along with our IT people here. They've already set and sent out the parameters to your IT peeps. It's just a reminder to walk them through that they need to have it set up on their SISs. So we're hoping that during this fall, you will have access to how you need to mark your students receiving eligible for 504 and the accommodations that correspond with each.
Just go in and edit.
Yes, yes.
Will we get a notice?
I will notify you. Well, see, here's the thing. Every LEA has their priorities and how they're going to build it, and it's not necessary. I can tell you when I have given that message to them and when IT has, but then you'll want to say, hey, IT person, were you at the conference and did you know? And then you can either email me and I can give you that contact person from IT here if that your representative was not at the conference, she can give him or her that information on how to build that in their system. Okay? The other part of board rule is the financial piece needs to be reported by student.
You have an online comment, it was sent privately, but it says that, their IT people think the state is adding 9 categories to SIS.
There are 9 categories.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I said something different. So where was I? Oh, the second part. The financial piece through your business administrator needs to be submitted to me by November 10th, and I'll show you that slide in just a sec. The financial piece is itemized by student. And some of you attended my WebEx training end of July. And my mic okay. You did, okay. And so there was a portion of that where I spoke to your business administrators about this report. Now, some of you might be one and the same here. So I'm going to show this to you as well. This is a report that Natalie, why am I forgetting her? Yes, Natalie Grange sent out to all business administrators, and this report has 3 different tabs. It gives the rule, the category, and how to fill out the sheet. It is calculated where you can write the number of students right here, the total salary and benefit costs in managing 504 plans. If there is a single 504 coordinator and that's that person's only job, then it would be the total salary. But if you say yes, someone's laughing here. If it's a 0.25 designation, then you would report that amount. And then other categories here, even including administrative staff, that will calculate an average of services by student. Okay, so that's one part. But then if you come to this last part, here's where the business administrator will put in the SSID number if they're going to report on FY 16-17 year, because some of them already have that. They've collected it. Some LEAs have. So they can report either the 16-17 school year, or they can report expenditures from July 1st through October 31st of this year. And I know we're just capturing a few months here, but we can at least get a percentage or an estimated amount that we can provide to the school board and then to legislature. Again, this is to determine the allocation statewide. And as you can see here, Jermaine, I think you were asking, okay, about additional services. So do you see what's here in each of these categories? When I did the training in July, there were some points that I was missing, and with your feedback, I added it to the spreadsheet. Okay? And then the calculation is automated here in an outcome at the column. Now, some of us might think, oh, well, the accommodations that I'm providing, it's not going to even exceed that 150% threshold. Why should I even provide that information? I still want to be able to say, here's what our schools are spending. And so give me what information you have, because I can total that amount and say, this is how much exceeded 150%, and this is how much has not. Okay? I want to give them that complete information. So your business administrators will be submitting that on November 10th. Okay, let me just. Yes.
Expenses to determine whether are
Yes, they are. Very good question. If expenses are incurred for to evaluate a student, does that is that covered under 504 expenses? Yes, they are.
What about first?
No, because it's a general education environment. But when we're looking at related services, technical technology assistance, and therapies of different sorts, yes, we can include those. Did we have a question back here as well? No. Did you? Okay. So the UTREX part, it'll be built and you'll be able to report there. There's no report that's due for that piece. Your administrators, however, reporting the financial cost, they need to send that to me by November 10th. And we will give reminders to you as well as to your BAs about completing that report. Okay. Now, the second piece too, after submitting the report, I just spoke to the legislature determining allocation. We already went to the report. Again, they have two choices, either to show the whole 15-16 school year in expenditures or expenditures from July 1st to October 31st. So here is the timeline of what this looks like. I did training in July. We have a meeting right now, November 10th. Your BAs submit their report. December 17th, I report to the state school board. They approve or ask questions, and I clarify and make corrections. And then we report, USBE reports to legislature. They make an allocation. And then between April and May, the board then will make a rule about the funding piece after they hear from legislature, okay? And then on June 30th, that's when the cycle of reports start. So there's an initial report November 10th, and then the cycle starts on June 30th every year from that point on. So the question is, so when are we gonna get our reimbursement? Right? It'll start in FY19. When you submit your report to us June 30th, at the end of this school year, depending on the allocation, we'll make that determination for how much you're going to be reimbursed. And you're probably going to say, well, when is that actually going to happen? I want to say it's in October of FY19, 18-19. And then I'll provide additional training for that as well. Any questions on the timeline? No, I think we asked them throughout. Okay. So this is where we all get to participate because you're probably sick of hearing me talk. So we're going to just talk about case studies because I believe that we learn through processing case studies and coming up with answers. Okay. So I'm going to have a volunteer that just wants to read. Ooh, I already gave you the answer. Gosh darn it. Does someone want to read the first part of this slide?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
So I start with the word parents.
Yes.
Parents submit a form to school nurse for child to receive ADHD medication during the school day. Because of HIPAA laws, the nurse did not alert staff about student's impairment. The student performed well academically in classes. Teachers described him as a bright young man with a pleasant disposition. However, his disciplinary history revealed multiple infractions for disruptive, defiant, and disrespectful behavior for which he received detention and both in and out of school suspensions. Did this district deny the student FAPE under Section 504 by failing to evaluate him?
Okay. So A, no. The student's disability did not adversely impact the academic performance. B, yes, the student's escalating behavior should have triggered the district's obligation to evaluate him. And C, no, the parent only requested the administration of medication, not an evaluation. Sorry to give you the answer. Okay? So the answer is yes, B. And why is it that? Child fine, right? And this it crosses over to our nurses. How tight of a collaboration do we have with nurses? Very close, yes.
So what are they going to evaluate him for? Passing his classes.
Right, right. And so,
They got 80,
mhm.
school counselor that's evaluating him.
Okay, so when we talk about access, we're also talking about behavior. And so what are the supports that we need to provide to the student? Now, the nurse has this information, and she has an individual health plan that she's designed for the student. The IHP is a report that the nurse consumes or uses, whereas a 504, it's an implementation so that the school knows about the student and what he needs to access. So depending, and this doesn't go into great detail about this, the student and his behavior, but it could mean that, okay, a determination is made that his behavior is directly tied to his disability, and therefore, what types of accommodations are we going to provide to the student in the classroom, on the playground, and in the lunchroom if needed? Okay? So the variety of people who know the student, they make up the team to make that decision. So it could be that one of the accommodations could be that the student sits in the front of the class. There is a visual signal that the teacher gives to the student that only the student knows. Because we also need to consider the confidentiality piece of 504s. So this is what a team decides. If it is that the student's behavior, escalates from 0 to 100 in a split second, then maybe a functional behavior assessment needs to be done, and a behavioral implementation plan needs to happen as well. So you see the spectrum of accommodations, and it's particular to that student and on a case-by-case basis. So very, very good question. Yes?
So when it says evaluate, it's not necessarily saying that you're having to test it. You already have.
Right.
It's more just gathering all their features.
Exactly. So evaluation could be behavioral observations. It could be time of day, the student's performance within the school day. So yes. Okay. Now, I liked the question that this person asked. What's your name? I'm sorry. Carol. Her question earlier was, if we need to pay for evaluation costs for eligibility, does that fall under 504? The answer is yes. Which leads me to the next part. Okay, hold on. Let me answer this. So, which leads me to the next part. And I want to say openly that I was culpable of this when I was in the field. But now that I have been notified of the bad practice, then I made those corrections. But I had learned from other people, so you follow what you see, and it's like, oh, okay, thank you so much for notifying us. We'll have this in process. If you could bring the doctor's diagnosis of your child's impairment, we can then start our 504 evaluation. Okay, we can do that, but we'll have to pay for the cost. If a team determines that we need additional information or evaluation coming to make that determination, then we incur those costs as an LEA. It is not incumbent upon the parent to go out and get that diagnosis. Would it be beneficial for a parent to provide that information? It could be beneficial, but is it required in order to do a 504 eval? No, absolutely not. Okay. And that was in answer to this ADHD scenario as well. And there's a link provided from OCR in making those clarifications. Yes?
So what if students in a classroom education is not used at school? So it's given
Okay.
before school. But yet they need accommodation.
Okay, so the question for our online peeps is that what if a parent comes in and lets a teacher know that, hey, my son takes medication for ADHD, but he takes it before school. I just wanted to let you know. That
Teachers see
so the teacher sees some academic less than expectations performance. So that would obligate us as a school. That falls under child find. So at that point, once we've been notified,
so then the bus and
yes,
identify and then call the parent and say,
yes, we need consent to evaluate. Here's a form that you can, if you could provide us your observation from home, we will look at different assessments here, and then we will convene a meeting. Okay, I need you to say that on the mic because people online need to. And then after that, Amanda, I'll answer the question.
So I have, staff coming to me saying, oh, the student I know is on medication for ADHD, but we're not seeing any behaviors at school, academically that they're doing well. And I'm kind of don't know, should I actively pursue that under child find because I do have a diagnosed disability, but we're not seeing it at school.
Okay, so you guys are asking really good questions. There's a part of Section 504 that speaks to mitigating factors, right? So we make an evaluation based on the disability without those mitigating factors. And so we can look at observations. Maybe the parent can give us feedback on what actually occurs when the child is not on the medication so that we could build an accommodation plan that supports the student and that we know about those supports in the classroom. Well, parents can always refuse consent, but you want to go through that process as well. And for a student, if a parent says, well, no, I don't want to evaluate, he's totally fine, that student still should be flagged as a student with 504 disability because there are other pieces to the law that says a student regarded as having a disability or has record of the disability. So if there's bullying or harassment or discrimination that takes place, then that part is activated for them. That is the better practice, yes. Okay? Yes. Yes, because the consent is to provide accommodations. Okay? And so it is this part when harassment or discrimination takes place, that they are a protected class and we need to take additional measures to ensure safety as well as inform our teachers of what that looks like and staff members. And so, yeah.
I think with that specific case, I think it's important, obviously the communication with parent, right? I mean, even though that, the student doesn't need accommodations, I think, just having the communication piece, right? And then documentation that the parent is aware and, the kid doesn't need any more, further accommodations or a 504 plan. I think that protects us.
It does. It does, and giving them the procedural safeguards, should they at some point in time say, oh, you know what, I think I want to engage in a team meeting to look at accommodation plans. Okay, and
So the online comment was, a little earlier in the conversation, it was, they were concerned that every student who has a behavior plan should have a 504. So remember to repeat that.
so the question is, every student with a behavioral plan, should they be on a 504? Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're saying that they should be evaluated for a 504, probably. Yeah. Whether or not they're eligible, if they cross that threshold of, substantially limits one or more major life activity, then that can be addressed within the team meeting. Okay, question here, and then we'll move there.
Okay, I know we're on case studies, but back on the reporting in the 9 categories, one thing I had a question on is training for our staff regarding dealing with some of those disabilities. Is that included in that reporting on the 504s? So in other words, we do extensive training regarding students that have diabetes or have another health impairment or something like that. Is that included in those
In the board
costs?
rule?
Oh, yeah,
in the-
for the reporting.
Oh, the training piece.
Yeah, the training piece.
That actually would come under the 504 coordinator's salary or part of that designated piece of the coordinator's salary.
Okay, so the coordinator's salary, but what I'm saying is you're training your staff who are dealing with those students. So all those teachers, all the people you bring in to do the training, that's what I'm saying, those
Right.
costs?
That's not included. That would be considered any other sort of training to general education teachers.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Okay. No one's asked me, hey, Momi, are you going to have a PDF and send it out to me on this? Yeah, I will. I will. So, Jermaine, if you'll just read the next case, we'll move on. Is that okay? Oh, another question back here. Sorry. Yeah, no, we need a mic. Alan.
All right, so here's my question, and this is probably 90% of my 504s. They're behavioral, not the wheelchair and other things. So all these students need a behavior intervention plan, which crosses into special ed. Counselors don't write BIPs, special ed teachers do. But we can't use special ed funding for 504s. And so there's this big crossover where the special ed teacher's like, 504, not IEP. And I'm like, 504 accommodations aren't working. They need a behavior intervention plan. Then there's this big question, well, who does what job and what work and who pays for what? And that's 90% of, I've been a counselor for 10 years. Most of them are behavioral. Rarely do I get a straight up, hey, student needs elevator access. It's usually like they're tearing the class apart and we need a behavior intervention plan, but that doesn't fall under counselors. So
Yeah.
that's my question.
Alan, we're caught in the middle when we are providing support to 504s, yet we're using practices from IDEA.
Right.
And so, how do I get to this answer?
So my question
I'm
is, what do we
assuming
do?
first that a red flag has already been, raised for IDEA evaluation and qualification, and they've already gone through that. They didn't qualify.
Yeah, IQ-wise are
Okay.
fine, just behaviorally not.
So the part it needs to be determined by the LEA as to who does this, but the cost then for that evaluation under 504 can be part of the report and expenditures.
Okay.
Now you're going to ask me, how do I itemize that if it takes an hour out of 8 hours during a day?
Sure.
And
Then I have had
but-
some discussions with special ed teachers, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we've done years of 504 accommodations and they're not working. And we've modified and done intervention after intervention to where they're not functioning in the general ed classroom. And then there's the question, well, is specialized education the most, the least restrictive environment for this child? and so they can qualify through like another health impairment. I don't know, but that's kind of where we're looking at.
For
Only way
some
we
of the
could pay for
students.
this is if they have an IEP. Well, then let's get them on an IEP somehow.
And as long as we are following correct procedures and keeping record of what we're doing, sometimes
safe.
in these nebulous spaces, we do what we know we ought to be doing. Then worst case scenario, should a complaint go through, we actually have record of interventions and supports along the way. And then if it's circulated back to IDEA qualifications, then we can show a procedure that took place for that student. You have a question? Okay. Okay. Kelly.
Yes.
Oh,
So-
microphone.
The new Utah State guidelines for least restrictive behavior interventions are now for all children.
Yes.
It's a great manual to learn how to write a behavior plan, so you don't have to have your special ed teachers do that.
That's right. That is LRBE. We call it least restrictive behavioral intervention. We have a document, if you would like for me to also send that out to you, Amanda, can you take note of that? That I could give you the link to LRBE, where a lot of people think that that's exclusive to special ed.
We call
but
it
it's-
LRBI, but
Yeah,
I've not heard
sorry,
LRBE.
LRBI.
It's right on Carol's website. You can get right to it.
And I'll send them that link.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just a simple, unrelated question. So on the 504, those categories of disability that we're looking at, would ADHD then be under other health impairment or mental health?
It is under, I believe it's under mental health. I believe it is under mental health, but I also have it in the handbook as well. I have it because there are subcategories to each one, and I believe it's under mental health, according to the board rule. Do we need to talk about dual enrolled students? A case study of dual enrolled? Okay, basically, the scenario where a student is, when I say dual enrolled, they are taking a live interactive class from a university professor. The question is, do the 504 accommodations follow the student in a higher ed setting? Yes, it still does.
What about dual enrolled with K-12 online? So they're in school.
Same thing. And so what about students who are dual enrolled online? Those accommodations need to be communicated to the teacher or the administrator of that online school, as well as the professor on campus. That was a quick one. Resources here about that. Now, has anyone ever read Dear Colleague letters? Why do those letters come out? Well, they see this huge amount of a similar type of complaint, and that's when it triggers an OCR letter. That was one of them. Okay, the dual enrollment. All of these that I'm sharing with you were OCR letters that came out. We talked about physical restraint, and here in Utah, having the LRBI manual can help guide us in general education as well. We also have it included in board rule. Again, this is for our general education as well as our special education populations. So it pertains to us. Does 504 include students who are abusing drugs? Okay, so 504, when they are in the act of abusing drugs, it doesn't cover them. 504 does not cover the student. Yes. Drugs or alcohol. Right, and so there's a part that came out from OCR that When they are in recovery and transitioning, if they're outside of school, and they're transitioning back into school, that should be a red flag, because there are probably underlying reasons as to why they're using these mechanisms to cope. Cope with what? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? What is it? Okay, and so to peel off those layers, yes, it would be looking at the underlying cause of that behavior. So when our students, many of us have students who transition, they go into treatment and they transition back into school. That's information sometimes is kept confidential between the parent and the principal. Sometimes the school counselor doesn't even know. But once we know, that should be our child find that says, hey, let's see what evaluation, or enter into an evaluation for eligibility and make a determination if the student is eligible and provide accommodations. Okay. Alan. Do I have it? Sorry, flip.
Permanent. I mean, the example I think of is if you have like a pregnant student or something like that, they wouldn't fit under 504 either, because it's not going to be with them indefinitely.
Yeah, the 504 wouldn't
Yeah.
cover a student who's pregnant.
But they certainly need accommodations, and so
Right. But,
Yeah.
but if they have, say, gestational diabetes,
yeah.
then it'll trigger the 504. Okay. School fees violations in FAPE. Does someone want to read that? Alan? Okay.
Schools must provide FAPE to students with disabilities under Section 504 at no cost to their parents. Exception, if all other students are required to pay a fee for an activity,
Are we good?
then the Section 504 student is expected to as well, unless on fee waiver. However, if the student needs to access summer school as a part of extended school year due to his or her disability, that student is not required to pay to attend, even though all of the students are required to pay. We cannot expect parents to pay for equipment or related services to their child in order for him or her to access FAPE. Requiring a parent to attend a field trip places burden on the parent because of their child's disability, missed work, pay for their own lunch, etc. The school nurse or trained individual would be responsible to administer medications during the school activity.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of information there. But basically, it's tied to costs and fees. And while, a parent may volunteer and say, hey, can I go with Johnny to provide the accommodation? Because, that's their first time learning about their child having diabetes or something. That's the parent's choice, but we still cover if there's lunch involved, and we pay for that. But we cannot require a parent. Oh, Johnny cannot attend because there are no services provided unless you come and you miss work and so on and so forth. So we need to be cognizant of that and provide whomever it is within the school setting to support the students' disabilities.
So even if the parent is volunteering as a chaperone on the field trip, and many other parents are volunteering, just because their child has diabetes or something like that, you have to cover their parents' costs, not the other?
Yes, because the parent is there specifically, if it is that the parent is there specifically to provide that support to the student, to check their glucose levels, to monitor that. It could be, say, a second or third grade student, and they're just barely learning how to monitor it themselves.
But if you're still sending other people that are trained to do that, so the parent doesn't necessarily have to be there.
That's right. If there is a trained individual that will be going, and a parent wants to volunteer, then they'll have to cover their own costs. But if they are there to provide support for that disability, then we absorb the cost. Okay?
Okay, so
Alan, can I get the? It's on.
Okay, so the question I have regards the, however, if the student needs the access to summer school part. So it says as a part of their school year due to their disability. So what's the determining factor? I mean, if they passed other courses but fail this one course and they have to take summer school to, get those credits, you're saying that the school has to bear that burden of that cost? If the school doesn't offer the summer school and they go somewhere else, we have to take that cost? And also, what's that determining factor of the disability? I mean, if you were giving them the accommodations and they still failed because they weren't doing the work or whatever, how do you determine that?
So the question is that deficit tied to the student's disability? And so here's where we need to be careful, because this is a case-by-case basis, right? So say a student has migraines, and those migraines usually come in the morning. So they're trying to go to school and they're coping with those migraines. And you see that they're failing those classes in the morning. But the rest of the day, they look fine. That's where we need to, have those lenses as a team and say, okay, I see a trend here. The student is either absent or, leaves class because of these migraines. And if that's the case and the school year ends, then the extended school year would apply. So that's just a scenario. Or a student suffering from anxiety or depression, and there's a huge part of that person's schooling that is missed, then the extended school year would apply in that, as determined by the team. So what if it's oppositional defiance and they are refusing to turn in that work?
You're doing everything that's listed in their accommodation plus some.
I would say the question would be by your team is that behavior tied to their disability? And if the answer is yes, we continue to provide support, we record what we have done, and we still move forward. But yes, we would still continue. If it's determined that it's tied to the disability, then we still provide that support.
Would you just please clarify that 504 plan does not guarantee passing grades?
Okay, so Laura didn't have a mic. That a 504 plan does not guarantee passing grades, period. It does not. It's about the access. And that's where, in my short experience, that when we have correct procedures in place and we record, we take notes on each step during each step of the way, then when there's a claim that there was a deficiency in providing support, we have record and we can respond to that. Thank you, Laura. Your mic. Right, by Jermaine. I think it's on.
Another quick question about that. So if a student has a learning disability, like in the area of math, and then they fail, a quarter of math and have to, make up that, so would that be paid for then, or would they need to still pay for it?
If the learning disability is in math, that would seem like an IDEA, IEP circumstance.
But what if it's not?
If it's tied to the disability, then the question will still go back to what is the disability, and if it's tied to that, then yes, we would provide accommodation. I just don't necessarily have a scenario that way, but you're providing one. So I'm going back to, if the team convenes and they see that the deficiency is tied to the disability, then we continue with accommodations. Is there any way we can turn that off? Sorry. Okay. Betsy, but email me and I'll research the literature further and respond to that. Okay? Okay.
Have a particular student for whom that
Okay, because I'm wondering if there's other layers as well to that. Okay, parents notify the principal that their child is easily distracted when completing short tasks at home, while also the student is getting in trouble in school. Thus far, the student has been sent to in-school suspension twice. The parent requested the 504 team meeting. It was made at the beginning of the school year. Given the 45-day evaluation period in Utah, the school is using this time to evaluate the student before convening the 504 team meeting. The parent is fearful that their child would be expelled or suspended from school further before the 504 team meeting takes place. What are the rights of the student? What rights does the student have in this situation? Because the evaluation hasn't, it hasn't, yes. The student is still covered. Okay. We've not done the evaluation, but once we've been notified, child find either by the teacher or by the parent, then the protections kick in. Okay, I have these questions coming in too. And I'm going to show you scenarios for yes and scenarios for no. And I think I sent this out by email because someone did ask me for clarification. And I'm sorry that I'm long-winded in some of these emails, but I just want to give you a full picture instead of jump to a conclusion that you use broadly, mistakenly. Okay? A mother refuses services under IDEA to place her son in a part-time special day class, but is requesting 504 accommodations for assistive technology to address her child's hearing impairment. Does the 504 team convene a meeting to determine eligibility and accommodations? Yes. But they revoked services in special ed. Yes. Okay. The 504 team conducts an evaluation to determine disability threshold for eligibility and accommodations. Although the parent rejected IDEA learning services in the educational context that IDEA provides, the access to FAPE according to the child's impaired hearing requires the LEA to provide assistive technology under Title or 504 and Title II.
Online question. Once an evaluation takes place and accommodations are in, what happens if a student continues to misbehave? Can an LEA produce disciplinary action or proceed with disciplinary action? Seems like a gray area where students with ADHD, ODD cannot be held accountable for their behavior.
I guess it depends on what the disciplinary action is. We follow IDEA regarding suspension rules, right? So if it's suspensions and either cumulatively, so they're suspended, throughout the year, or consecutively, when we go beyond that 10-day threshold, then we need to reconvene an evaluation to see what additional supports the student needs, right? So it depends on the disciplinary action, but it should send a red flag. The question is, if it's happening on a regular basis, then and the accommodations are not working, then we need to evaluate what those are and make changes. Because we still want them to have that access to FAPE. Right? So looking at it and changing it, making adjustments. Does anyone want to make a comment to this as well? Betsy, could you use the mic?
We have a student in the middle school that kind of fits this. He came in to us without any services whatsoever, no 504, no IEP, nothing, and he was absolutely disruptive pretty much throughout the day. Now, 2 years later, we have him in special ed classes, so he's got an IEP, and we actually are upping his services. Now, if you look at the testing, you know, his testing looks like he could, you know, function in the regular ed classroom and do okay, but he can't. And we're now finding that he's being slightly more successful in his special ed classes. He's passing those. He's still having trouble in gen ed. He's still disruptive, but it's starting to go down. So even though that's a student that the evaluation looked like he doesn't need special ed, he actually is benefiting from it.
So if they went through the procedures to make that determination, then that would be the appropriate placement for the student. If it is that the determination was he still wouldn't qualify, there's still a spectrum, and it might look like for a student that they would need an assistant, a one-to-one. You know, but that still is restrictive, but maybe that's what needs to have happen in order for him to remain in the gen ed class. With this part, so if it's okay, so we're going to go on to the next one. That's a great segue. Okay, so parents withdrew IDEA consent in having their daughter placed in a school for severely handicapped children, requested for 504 accommodations in a general education setting. Is the team required to provide accommodations? Oh, wow.
But they signed a refusal.
And if it's directly tied to the IEP and that it is educational in nature, with this,
We can bypass parent for IDEA.
a parent may not bypass IDEA's administrative procedures. Okay, so they need to go through those procedures, and even if when they revoke that, does that make sense? Then they can't automatically go to 504 and have those same accommodations applied.
So we can say no 504 because we feel like it needs to be handled under IDEA.
If IDEA, yes, if we're looking at placement decisions, specialized instruction, transition services, that's educational in nature. So according to this case, the judge ruled in favor of the school, the district. Okay, but I see a lot of case laws that go back and forth. Okay, so if you have questions about a particular case, still email me and I'll look, because there were about 10 to 12 that I looked at. I just wanted to show a yes and a no example. Okay. Oh, wow. I got all sweaty during that part. But that's okay, because you guys I had to think on my feet too, you know, but I hope that was useful to you because it helped you process through different scenarios, and then you could see how it would tie to perhaps something else, right? Medical diagnosis, I gave you an example for ADHD, but that could apply to something else. Right? We don't require that unless we want to pay for it. So the second part, how am I doing on time? Wow. This part, I'm going to talk to you about this handbook. And I have to go on record in thanking Jennifer Slade in providing this handbook to you in the field. The resources that she has here, I tweaked some, I made additions to some, but I didn't change what she put in here. Okay? So thank you, Jen. If you're online, this has been very helpful to me and you coordinators in the field. We are going through a revision process, and this is where I have this handbook in draft form where I want to get your feedback. And as I said earlier, you know, I hear from coordinators, we really look at the examples of disabilities and accommodations. That's what we look at. Or we look at the forms to see what kind of forms are there, and we use those forms. And so I made some changes to the handbook with additional disabilities and recommendations for accommodations. I've included case scenarios within certain parts of the handbook to bring into context what the law is saying. And OCR back in December, they actually have a parent-student guide that they pushed out nationally. And I used, with their permission, I used their case scenarios within the handbook and some other language as well to make clarifications. And then I've also included Utah law and the new board rule as links. The primary sections to the 504 speak to, okay, what does 504 cover in Part D? What are the requirements? How do we identify? What are the strategies? And then in the appendices, we have the sample forms. We've got the links. We've got OCR letters and links to other parts of the U.S. Department of Education. So procedural requirements for compliance. I also have these parts listed within the handbook. Like I said, I'm going to give you sections here. If there's a part that you put into practice as an LEA and you see that it works consistently over a long period of time, maybe we can add to this. Okay? So part of the compliance, I plucked out some examples from the handbook, and I'll show you those slides in just a minute. One is, do we have a non-discrimination notice posted in prominent places in our school? Do we have it posted on our website? Do we have it posted in our student and faculty handbook? I see non-discrimination notices, they're broad. They cover Title VI, Section 504, Title IX, Title II, employees and students. But when it comes down to 504 compliance, you need to make sure that that is stated in your non-discrimination statement. Okay? When a complaint goes to Office for Civil Rights or an inquiry comes to me, I actually go through these steps. And I go through these steps not to get anybody in trouble. It's just, hey, let's align here so that if parents want to take the complaint to the next level, OCR will do the same thing, and you'll have all your ducks in a row. Do we include your name, title, and contact information, including phone number and email? Yes. Well, what if I don't want to give my name out? Well, if you create a link or an email, a generic one, 504 coordinator at jordanschooldistrict.org, okay? As long as stakeholders can contact you, that is the key here. What's my role as a coordinator? How many of us are coordinators at the LEA level? Because I have some of you as site administrators. Okay, so these are the steps that you want to go through to ensure compliance. Posting of your non-discrimination statement, establish and monitor your process for referral identification and review, maintain your data, conduct staff training. And I do want to be a resource to you, and I have 504 coordinators that say, I steal your slides, go for it. You can, and then they go into their LEA and they provide training for their site administrators. Consult with the Director of Special Education. I think that might go without saying. Okay, it's very important. Serve as a liaison. Sometimes I'll come to you, I'll call you, I'm like, hey, how's it going down? Do you have my, what, I've sent out in Survey Monkey, what is your highest increase of disability that you have seen within the last year. And what was it? Yes, it's actually equal to ADD, ADHD, where it was like this before. Okay, so I use you as a liaison so that when I report out to the board or to legislature, I can speak to that. Because we may assume that they know, but they actually don't. So when I give them data from the field, it really opens their eyes like, whoa, we didn't realize that. Okay? And likewise, with questions that you have or clarity, I want to provide the best information that I can. And sometimes I'll say, hey, you know, I can call OCR and we want to remain, anonymous. So I will call OCR and ask certain questions and then make clarification for certain scenarios. You will provide reports to USBE through UTREX, and then I also send your contact information to Office for Civil Rights. Process for identification and evaluation is also included in the book. Criteria for identification, and I think we know this part. And then the second and third part has to do with discriminatory practices that could be pervasive among students who don't necessarily have a plan. Okay? It goes back to we've identified the disability, but they don't necessarily have a plan. You'll want to still flag the student for your information should you see data and outcome that there's something going on. Okay, in practice or in the school environment. Okay, so examples of disabilities and accommodations. This is the list right here that I have in the book. I'm going to give you the handouts, but you tell me, do I have everything on there that you see? Hey, I didn't think so. So that's the part where I want you to give me feedback so that I can look at appropriate accommodations, or even the accommodations that you provide that you see works for the student. Okay, so I'll give that to you. Okay, we don't have time to discuss that. And then these are our fabulous forms. Oops. Do we have these? We have these forms in the handbook. Do we need to provide greater clarity to these forms? Do you have access to a form that you think works for you? I can look and make adjustments to what we currently have. Betsy.
I noticed on the disabilities, there are quite a few more than what on our for, and so that would add those.
Yes, I actually have them added already. Well, this is in draft form, but yes, it will be added electronically when we're ADA compliant. Laura.
Just a quick point about making sure that we are not overlapping special education classifications with any impairments, that we don't just jump to that conclusion unless you've got documentation of that impairment.
Laura, can you say that again on the mic? Is that
Right.
I think the battery's dead.
Is it? I just wanted to caution everybody to not just jump to the special education classifications under IDEA when you're putting those on the plans unless you actually have that diagnosis. Because like traumatic brain injury, I notice is on that list, and that's actually a special education classification, but you may have a doctor's note or something that uses that. But that's why I think it's just easy to kind of assume some like other health impairment, that's actually a special education classification. So we just need to be careful what we're writing on plans unless we have that somewhere written, like there used to be in special ed or something like that.
So do we need to make better clarification within the handbook in those two areas especially? Okay, then we will do that. And that's where even in practice, it's so important that we include our special ed coordinator as well. So thank you, Laura. Okay, so let's go ahead and should we form our groups now? No. Let's go take a 5-minute break, and then I'll give you what we're going to do for the next part, and then move from there. Is 5 minutes long enough? Okay. Believe
Yeah, well, we just ended up now.
Okay. All right.
Okay. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Oh.
Okay. Yep, we're ready to move on. Let's do some, Amanda, if you could write these notes down. Given what I have presented thus far, what are some, and having the listserv and the websites, you know, I want to be, the resources to be useful to you. What are some things that I could do in addition to this to provide you support? Any other recommendations? I know, it's case by case. You know, when you are in a school setting, you always talk about tiered interventions, right? So this is my tier 1 where I provide the training, preparation beforehand. Tier 2 would be, you know, actually even answering individual questions, because nothing has turned into an inquiry or a complaint. So to me, a tier 2, when you have questions, I want to be able to clarify those and provide you the support that way. Tier 3 would look like a complaint or an inquiry coming from a parent, and then I ask for clarification on both sides. I go through the requirements and try to seek a resolution. When looking at other states and seeing what they do when they receive state funding, I called about 10 states and nothing. And then I finally called Harry Zerkel. He's a guru in special education and 504. Called him back east, and he said, yeah, no, there's no state that provides legislative funding, so you would be the first. So we're really starting something new here where other states are looking at us. But going to that tier 3 level, when those complaints or inquiries come in, it is the support and focus of this state board to resolve complaints at the local level. That's because when we do that at the local level, we are immediately responding to those complaints instead of having that go through different mechanisms. And that's why it's so important that we have our due process information in our policies and practices as well. And that's something that I have learned too, that if a concern comes to my office, I will actually ask the parents, were you able to submit a complaint? What took place at the school level? But that I assure them that I won't, it's not that I won't address their concerns, but I wanted to see if they went through those levels. And then we also know that if a concern or a complaint comes to you within your LEA or to us at the state, we always need to provide information to the Office for Civil Rights and how they could file a complaint if they feel that that's necessary. Okay. Okay, so we have about, 20-something of us here today? I don't know how many if you counted, Amanda, but if I could get us in groups of 3, I have parts of the handbook here that I'd like for your groups to look at. Okay, so I have 4 copies of the forms. Okay, all of the forms. And if there are 3 groups that want to look at the forms to provide me feedback, that's great. I have parts of OCR questions and clarification along with state laws. There's a question that I put in here about laws regarding administration of medication. That's a question. Should I include that in here or should I not? So these are state and laws and board rules. The different types of accommodations. I have 3 copies of these as well. So depending on what you think, where you think you can give the best feedback as a group, you can come up and, well, you can form your group first, and then you can come up and decide which one you want to take. And then I have red pens here so that when you give me feedback, I know what I'm looking for in red. Does that make sense? Okay. I thank you guys for coming here to provide this, because I felt like, okay, I just announced this to have this online. Everyone's going to move online, and then I won't have a work group here. But really, your perspectives and practices are influencing a better product, I believe, that will serve other coordinators. So you can come up here and grab these packets. And then people online, you guys have the documents. They were emailed to you, and the documents were specific to the forms and to accommodation examples. Yeah, so you just take one
thing.
Yeah, one pile, 'cause some are combined. One pile. Okay. And then those of you online, if you will look at those and email. Somebody thought you were still on break. Oh, sorry. And email me your recommendations. Please be specific in your recommendations via email, okay?
These are the same.
Yeah,
So
they're the
am I-
same. Just take
okay.
one.
Just take one. So
Yeah.
are we all looking over each other's shoulders?
No. So you will,
Okay.
with 2 other people, will work on that. Oh, yes, you will be. You're going to work as a group together from one form.
So we're working on all 3 of these?
Yeah, yours is, I put that one in a pile because these are addressing procedures.
Okay.
So, yeah. These are examples of disabilities and accommodations. If anything's missing here that I need to add to.
Somebody already grabbed the laws.
Oh, yep, someone already grabbed the laws. But you can sit with them.
I told her I'm ready to go. You're good. I just need your approval.
You're good. So we're good. And I've been talking to Kathy on text.
Okay, good.
Let's go ahead and reconvene. I can't express how grateful I am for having you guys provide me feedback to this handbook. I even got some feedback from online, but what I'd like for us to do now is, if as a group, could you share out some of the recommendations to the changes, to changing certain parts of the handbook, just to see if we have some common recommendations. And sometimes it triggers a learning process in different parts of how we support our students with disabilities. So we'll start here on this side, and then I will interject some recommendations from WebEx as well. Yes, so could you tell us what area of the handbook you are addressing, and then some recommendations?
Sure.
Oh, let me get you the mic, sorry. Your recommendations.
Okay, so we were looking over the 504s and then the forms, and some of our recommendations was to have a review of data form. So especially for our 3-year reevals, we can review that data and determine if we need to do more testing or evaluating. We also
So can you speak in greater detail about reviewing data form?
So every 3 years, you should review the data and evaluation of that 504. And so the review of data form would allow you to look at all the data that you've collected and see if the 504 is still needed and relevant.
So that kind of keeps us on track, like, oh, here's the 3-year trigger.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because I will say that I'm sure I've missed a couple 3-year.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
So the other one was a refusal, right? A refusal. So if you are proposing a 504 for a student and a parent is refusing those services, we have a refusal form. So we have it documented that we have offered this and they have refused it. Was there another one that we talked about?
Now, we don't have that form, so I'll go back and see, because I actually did read best practices.
Right. And the 2 other things we had talked about is how to officially exit a student from a 504, and that it'd be nice to have guidelines on what we should do at some point. And the other thing that I find helpful is just a really good like example of what a really well-written 504 would look like.
Ooh.
Did
you write that down? Okay, good.
I just think I know they're all individualized, but it's nice just to see a really good example of what a well-written and thorough 504 looks like.
Okay, good. What do you think? Yeah, cool. Yay! Thank you.
Private question was, is there a 3-year review requirement? Is there a 3-year review requirement for 504, or is it a yearly review?
Okay, so we follow best practices, and we want to review or at the annual mark to contact parents and students and say, hey, these are the accommodations. Does this still fit the need of the student? Okay. Can we review it sooner than that? Yes, if there is a need that arises. But on a regular basis, annually, we provide the non-discrimination notice, we provide the procedural safeguards to the student and the parent to make them aware of that, their protections. And then every 3 years, we do want to do a full evaluation, convene a 504 team meeting and make a determination more, I don't want to say more officially, because every year it still is an official document that we use, right? But to have the team members present to process, what's working, what's not working, and make possible changes. Okay. Next group back here.
I guess if you needed
Oh,
to
and
make before
microphone.
that, you probably could, and you felt like there's changes that you needed to make.
We just made a few comments throughout the documents that saying some things could be confused with IEP kind of evaluations.
Okay.
And so just providing that clarification. We thought that on the parent input form, what methods of discipline are used with your child at home might be too personal, and that some parents may not want to answer that question.
Are you marking these right on the form?
Yes,
Okay,
so
good,
I'm just
good.
going through. For the identification form, is that the eligibility form? Do we need signatures on that?
To
So
identification.
to identify them as being eligible, is that something, or are we just signing the plan?
I'll look at that one too to see if that requires signatures.
Okay.
I want to say it probably does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So I had a question about for the manifestation determination. So it says if any of those questions are marked yes, then that would kind of trigger an FBA. But for the question, was the student's misconduct the direct result of the failure by the school district or charter school to provide the services? So if that was a yes, would we still want to do an FBA?
No, because it could be already written out and we just didn't follow it.
Exactly.
So then maybe that needs to be somewhere else on that form.
Okay.
Okay, I
that
see
was
what
just a
you're saying.
clarification.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I'm going to grab that before I forget, and I'm going to put an arrow where it needs to go.
Okay.
Because I think it needs to go probably up here.
Okay.
Does that make sense between 1 and 2?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, back here.
Okay, so we were looking at the examples of disabilities and accommodations, and one of the things we noticed that almost all of them have some of the same things on them. So create a general list that applies to almost all of them, and then just do specifics for those individual ones. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. But say someone's going straight to a student with ADHD and they don't see the other list.
Yeah.
They might miss it.
Yeah.
Unless we put C general accommodations as in addition to this.
I thought it'd make it a little bit shorter to do it that way is all I was thinking,
Okay.
and short's always good for me.
Hey, come on in.
What, you don't want the 126-page document?
Just have a, sorry, listening.
I'll just leave that where it is, thank you. And then a lot of times, some of them say the same thing 2 different ways. Like,
okay,
the
be
one that was real
consistent.
common was like, accommodate for absences for doctor appointments, and then adjust attendance policy. You know, that's the same thing basically, so I think you can get rid of one of the 2.
Yeah,
You
yeah, I
know,
see
so,
what you're saying.
and I highlighted some of those as we went through. Other than that, it's just, you know, most of it's common sense based on what you do, so it looked good.
Was there anything missing that you see are impairments in your school that we didn't address here?
Nothing that we saw right here, but then we didn't get through all of them either.
Okay.
So
It's a long list.
It's a long list. Thanks.
Maybe I should have broken this up even more. Thank you. We have a group here. Oh, yes. Group here.
And so yesterday was my first day in there, and I said, no, you're not.
Yeah, I mean,
On that?
we did the examples of disabilities and accommodations, and we all looked at it, and we think it's fabulous. We didn't have any negative feedback whatsoever.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
We did that same one, so if you want to.
Yeah.
Us to put it all together. We had kind of the same feedback. It all was really good. There was just a few little tweaks, but I don't think everybody needs to know like all of them. Like the thing for like asthma, there wasn't anything here about bad air days, and that's kind of a big thing
yeah.
in Salt Lake. So we just kind of added that in to some places. And then we just had a question for you on one of them. What was it? Hold on. Yeah, epilepsy.
So chalkboard or carpet, avoid rooms with
Yeah,
carpet, and we weren't sure why those.
I don't know either, but I could find out.
Yeah, we just couldn't figure out we thought maybe it was a typo, avoid rooms without carpet. But then avoid using chalkboards, which just seems really weird.
It says provide clean rooms and avoid rooms with.
And that was with epilepsy?
Epilepsy, yeah.
I'm
So.
not really sure what the connection is there.
The chalk dust could be a trigger for a seizure.
Oh, it could.
Oh,
Like
I
maybe
did-
the dust
Yeah,
in
we
the
thought
carpet
about
could
that, but-
trigger seizures, but we weren't really sure.
Yeah, that's a
But we
good
made some
question.
really good notes.
So,
Just review them.
okay.
For why, just
Okay.
because we were just curious, and then there were just other little things, but it was great. Yeah,
I
it was
don't know
really
if
good,
they're
super helpful.
thinking that the carpet could.
The
some
chemicals
kids,
within the carpet.
well, or
the glue.
some kids will a trip and it will trigger a seizure.
Oh,
So
nice.
if they, yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know.
But it was great.
I'll look at that because I actually am curious
kinda
as to why.
curious too.
Yeah. I did add, did you notice that food allergies were there before, but then I split it from chemical and seasonal allergies? And maybe I need to split it even more from chemical and then have seasonal allergies as a separate category as well. Because I'm seeing that increase in schools. Oh, sorry.
We didn't do the accommodations thing, but I just wanted to speak personally from our district. I noticed on some of this things that say like modify workload and things like that, we are trying to really crack down in our district on being super specific because that'll help us in the long run when we have parents come back and say, you didn't follow my kid's plan, blah, blah, blah. So things like modify workload, I don't let my people say that anymore. I make them say, tell me what that looks like. You know, that the classic one is every other math problem or whatever, but you have to at least specify what that looks like so that every teacher, this is particularly important, of course, in secondary, so that every teacher, when they walk out the door from the meeting or whatever, will know exactly what the expectation is, and so will the parents, and so will the student.
Under which category did you see that one so I can make note? Yeah, it is.
Some of them are, too general. And so, reduce workload, anything like that, it needs to be spelled out, like, what does that look like?
So maybe kind of put in parentheses, be more specific or clarify what those are.
Right. Allow extra time between classes. Even that one, I would make my people say, what does that mean? Like 2 minutes? You know? For periods, passing periods in secondary and that kind of thing. So that's just what we're trying to crack down on in our district.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you. Hey, you wanted to say something and then you're going to share out?
Well, I just want to add to her, I hate the reduced assignment thing too. So one way you can say that, but I still say you have to be specific to each and case by case, but we'll often use quality over quantity, and I can't think of the other one. Concepts over, I can't think of, we use quality over quantity and something over length. Like if they had to write a paper, I'll have to look it up and send it in to you. I can't remember, think of it at the moment.
Okay. Demonstrate mastery.
Well,
over extended period of time. I don't know.
I'll send you the
Okay,
little
will you?
Yeah.
That would be great. Now, did you want to share out your section?
So we did forms. Mostly it was just a few little typo things. We thought that they were great. One question that came up between us was Where is it just the Utrex thing where you're identifying a classification area, the 9 areas?
Category?
The category?
It's on Utrex and on the LEA expenditure report.
Okay,
On both.
but it's not, we don't determine that in these forms, right?
Yes, you should, right?
Well, that,
No. And ours have not, so.
well, you identify
the
impairment. You
Right,
identify
but
the
not-
impairment, but not the category.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have the category according to board rule there because that's too general. That's, the categories are for the
Reporting.
LEAs, the state board and legislature to look. It's not on the form.
No, it's
not
just
on that
the
form, but when you
major life activity.
when you have it on your SIS,
No, she's talking about an online 504 writing.
right,
Right, but you're still doing it on any form, you're gonna identify the impairment.
right.
Well,
I see what you're saying
the
because you're
disability,
identifying,
not a class category or anything.
you're identifying the disability, but you're not classifying it within the 9 different categories. So on paper, okay, so help me process this. On paper, it's disability. On the student information system, it would be by category. So you see how the list isn't exhaustive? If I put the category, it could cause confusion, but I'm asking you, would that confuse you then when you go into your SIS and you see the 9 categories? Are you able to attach, okay, ADHD would go under? Okay, so we're okay with that? Okay, and that's why I didn't include it in the form too. And then anything else? Sorry.
No, we just made a couple little notes that are just more formatting than anything.
Okay.
And then,
okay, I have to tell you a backstory to that. We don't know where the Word document is, so I had to change it from PDF to Word, and the formatting is horrific, so we have to switch
I
it.
figured it was an overall formatting issue, not you.
No, it's a nightmare. Okay, I will in just a sec after your.
I personally wanted to just say that I like how you did the accommodations by kind of a disability area. I thought, and my people that I've been training like that, they thought that was a great, easy way to go and get, some ideas. So I commend that, even though it makes it, they loved the booklet, how it was, so.
We just added, we didn't, and tweaked a little bit, but didn't
Right,
take
and then
chunks out.
just a question.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students who are on special health care plans, not necessarily a 504, but we're getting more and more parents that want that 504, and we're like, you have a special health care plan. I mean, we're not fighting it, we're just like, okay, basically you just staple it, and sign it. But is there anything legally that's saying one or the other, or do you have both?
Well, okay, so that question is so timely, and I apologize that I didn't even have that as a slide, because this is a question that comes up quite a bit. The individual health plan is written by the nurse for the nurse, whereas the 504 accommodation is written up for school staff.
No,
and teachers.
not in our district.
504 accommodations for the teachers regarding access, it's written up that way. That's the purpose of the 504 accommodation. So people have asked, can we attach the IHP to the 504? As long as there's clarification in how that's applied in general ed or in the classroom setting, then that might be okay, but we need to be careful that we just don't go and staple it and say, okay, we're done.
No.
How are we notifying the teachers? How are the teachers? How is transportation involved with a specific type of disability? So that kind of, there's a segue to this piece where we have health plans, particular to students with diabetes. Let's just use that as a scenario, okay? And we have parents who, for whatever reason, the student needs has very specific glucose parameters that if they're above 1 point or below 2 points, that the monitoring is so specific, and even the medication, that it requires a nurse instead of a designated employee to follow through. Okay, so that seems simple, but then when you think about transportation, when we think about participating in extracurricular activities, when we're thinking about field trips, then it might be interpreted by school personnel and even the nurse that, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that it may be a one-to-one sort of situation, one nurse to one school, versus 1 to what, 3 or 5 or whatever that looks like in the LEA? And there may appear to be a contradiction in the Nurse Practice Act and what the student actually needs under 504. Are you guys following me on this? So on one hand, the LEA is saying, well, this goes against the Nurse Practice Act, but then when you're looking at the student and seeing that there's an actual need to that specificity, the nurse then becomes a related service to provide that accommodation, and then it might look like one-to-one in a school. So I'm seeing that increase or these issues being challenged at LEAs throughout the state, and I'm seeing it pop up more and more. So without disclosing LEAs, there have been certain complaints where policies have actually changed within the LEA to address those specific needs, contrary to what is interpreted in the Nurse Practice Act. Okay, I kind of went to another area, but I just wanted you to be aware of that piece. Okay. People online, one recommendation was to provide a PDF fillable format for all of the forms. Great suggestion. Yes. The other recommendation was to provide the translation to Spanish. So that was the other one. Then Paul, he actually gave a couple of recommendations. Paul Ashby, he said, is there a way that within the state system that we can build these forms? And I will double check. Each LEA has their own SIS. So there's, I think, 14 or 16 different SISs. So if we're going to put those constraints here, when we push it out, it might not be the form that you actually wanted. So the recommendation would be to see if you can work with your SIS IT peeps to get that form just exactly the way you want it. But in the meantime, we can certainly make a fillable PDF format for all of these forms. Okay?
I know we had access to, and I don't know if we got them from the national page or from you, but they are plans specific to diabetes, and I like them because they prompt people to address all the areas. Are those from the state?
Is it from the National Diabetes Association?
I can't pull it up right now because it's on our shared drive, but
I have not pushed anything
okay,
out.
I just was curious, but we just use it as a guide, not as our form, and then so that prompts them to think about things.
Could you forward that to me? I'd love to look at that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other area or group I didn't address? Did I come here?
We didn't have much.
We didn't have much? And then I'll answer your question.
So we had the procedural requirements section, and it pretty much was just straightforward law stuff. The only thing we had mentioned is maybe clarifying the intent of each of the notices, who it goes to, that kind of thing.
Okay, we talked about that because there is some confusion over that.
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank you. And then online.
So I just figured since we have quite a few different LEAs here, that I would ask who is doing the 504s at your school? Who's the maybe point person or the 504 coordinator at
the school level.
Right, the site.
So,
administrator of 504s.
I'll just pass the mic.
Or you can just shout it out, hopefully we can, and I'll repeat for the WebEx peeps.
I actually am the administrator and the coordinator, and I kind of liaison with our SPED director, but I do the writing and kind of head the team for our school.
So it could be a principal, where else? Who else? School counselors, special education director, school psychologist, dean of students, assessment coordinator. Wow, that's quite a bit. I did a survey out in the field, and 40% just of those who responded were school counselors. Yeah. No, it wasn't. It was second to administrators. Yeah, a designated administrator.
And I had a question on that. Is there a required certification by the state, and are they looking at that?
Nope. It's employed by the LEA.
Okay.
Okay, are there any additional?
We've got several comments. One particular question is, can one doctor's note count for any and all absences and tardies for a student on a 504? I have a parent who wants to add a 504 and include this in the 504 to exclude student from all absences and tardies.
Okay, so are all absences and tardies excused with one doctor's note in a 504? Okay, so the straight answer is no, but we still need to go deeper and see what's going on. And so it really is the team's decision. I mean, there are some extenuating circumstances, and so to give a blanket statement, but the doctor's note is one of the sources that we use, right? It's not the it source. I mean, the only one, the sole one. And so, yeah. Exactly. Right. So and it depends on the situation. And so I said no, but we just need to be careful. And for me, I can't make that determination at the state office. You know, I can look at information and provide recommendations, but it is the 504 team that makes that decision.
I was also going to say, most doctor's notes specify how many days or what day or what for.
So a doctor's note, I mean, if they wanted something more than a day or two of the doctor's visit, I think they probably want to determine that with a doctor, and the doctor can specify. Does that make sense?
I think they're talking, though, about a diagnosis.
Oh, I
letter,
see.
statement kind of thing.
Yeah, for that whole year at least, or for the 3 years.
Got it. Thank you.
But doctors are becoming more savvy in how they write the recommendations as well.
And then you had a request to do a scenario of a nut allergy or anxiety or both. I don't know if you have time, but.
Nut allergy, anxiety, or both. I will address the nut allergy because we can't say that we're allergy free, right? Once we say we're allergy free or nut free, then we're open to liabilities that we don't necessarily have control over. But if we have like a designated area that, again, depending on the student, a table that is nut allergy, it's not aware, there's another term, but it's definitely not free, but we provide those spaces, then we're okay. And maybe I need to push something out in this regard as well. Did you write that down?
Yeah, and then they commented back they would also like you to cover anxiety.
Okay, anxiety. What part of anxiety? Well, because if it is without a doctor's diagnosis, again, a variety of people who know the student, they can give an assessment, How is it manifesting? Is there a pattern of behavior?
So I do have a question about that. So I have a little girl who's in my office. Obviously, not around any class. Not you could see her physically. We do the whole, we put on the little magic triangle, the writing. I sometimes say, I mean, but clearly she would follow. Just parent. So, but there won't. She's not. So when I create a 504, what all of the proof, I guess. If I send her off to school, if they're not going.
No, they.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, and you would make that determination with your team just based on your observation here is data that goes into the assessment piece to help you guys decide.
So
And
I don't have to do assessment, task, and all
no,
of that other stuff.
no.
The assessment piece,
Observations, you can look at attendance,
and the interventions.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if a school should say that, give me a call and then we'll get that straightened out.
I kind of had a question coupling with that.
Okay.
In terms of attendance and the state requirement for attendance. So you have a student that is not coming to school at all, and the parent is calling the child in and saying it's anxiety, but you don't have any documentation or anything. And it started from the beginning of the school year. New student, don't have anything on it. So the state basically says when they're not in school for, a certain period of time, you have to report it. Not only that, you have the disenrollment policies. So it's kind of like, at what point you're trying to accommodate, but the parent's not able to give any documentation, and the only thing that you get is that an exam is forthcoming sometime in late October.
It still triggers the child fine
So you
timeline,
still
and
go
you,
along that with your team, even
you
though
still
you
want
don't
to.
have observations, because you really haven't observed this student.
If it is that the student's in middle school, then maybe we need to go back to the elementary school to look at observations there, assessments there. The parent is certainly a part of the team where they can give information. If the parent wants to provide a diagnosis, at their choice, that can be part of it as well. But it still does trigger the child fine and convening a meeting.
So I guess my point is, you're not going to really get in trouble with the state by trying to follow the.
If you follow your procedures, you won't, because you have documentation that the student is enrolled, you're doing an evaluation, you're gathering all the sources and pieces, you've convened a meeting, because it might be that the student is going to have to access online schooling. How will that student be able to do that? Who will provide it from your school, and so on and so forth. So it's still making that effort in reaching out to the student, and maybe the plan would be graduated eventually, that the student attends one period in the day in online school, then two, and then decrease online school. So as long as we're showing that effort, you should be okay. Yeah. It is 11 o'clock. Were they cut off just like that?
They're going to be soon.
Okay.
That's why I'm cutting you.
Well, thank you all for your input and participating in this meeting, both online and here in person. And your feedback is so important to me that I will take this week. You'll see an email go out about the handbook training in October, and we hope to have everything ADA and up and ready to go as a link for you to use. In the meantime, if you don't have access to the current 504 handbook because it's not ADA compliant, email me and I can send it back out to you again. Okay? You'll have that at least for what, 2 weeks before I put in the new handbook. Okay? Thanks so much, you guys. Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Appreciate it.